Muy buenos días a todas y a todos. Es un placer darles la
Good
bienvenida.
morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this third and last day of FAO Transforms 2023 Fair. My name is Matias Reeves. You've seen me in the previous days, and I am a regional resource mobilization expert at the FAO Office for Latin America and the Caribbean. As in the previous sessions, I will be joining you today, and we will have the session from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. in Santiago de Chile hour, and we will be exploring four inspiring experiences corresponding to the Better Life category, which is one of the four betters of our strategic framework at the regional level. These four betters are a roadmap of sorts that guide FAO with regard to how it wants to directly help achieve Sustainable Development Goal 1, which is to end poverty, SDG 2, which seeks to eliminate hunger, and SDG 10, which seeks to reduce inequalities. This is crucial for us to achieve the 2030 agenda as a whole. Today, and we will hear from Catalina Moyano, who will moderate the experience part, and she will show us various initiatives to help the creation of more sustainable livelihoods. A Better Life aims to drive inclusive economic growth by reducing inequalities between urban and rural areas and between gender and countries at different levels. This involves increasing the income of smallholder farmers, focusing public spending on agriculture, ensuring land tenure security, and empowering women in land ownership, contributing to the overall well-being of communities. Now, with all of this in mind, I would like to give the floor to Catalina Moyana, who is a support specialist for the regional initiative Thriving and Inclusive Rural Societies of FAO's Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean. Go ahead, let's go with the Better Life block.
Buenos días
Good morning,
a todos y todas
everyone,
nos acompañan en este
joining us
segundo
here
día
today at
de
this
nuestro
last day of
ciclo
presentation of
de
experiences.
este
As
espacio
it's a pleasure for me to
con
moderate this
temáticas que
opportunity.
enmarcan en este
Today,
marco.
we will learn about four
Cada una de
experiences
estas
that are
acciones
framed by a better
busca
life.
las
Each
condiciones
initiative
que viven
seeks to
muchos
improve the
pueblos
conditions in which
en
thousands of
conflictos
people live,
fronterizos,
especially in areas that are affected by economic and climate factors.
además
The-
con un ejemplo del gran
These are also
trabajo
an initiative of
realizado
all of the work
por
carried
FAO
out
junto
behind the
con
scenes
el
by the
resto de
FAO
países del
teams
mundo.
and their cooperation
La sesión
partners.
se estructurará bajo la
This
premisa
session will be
de
structured
presentar dos
first,
iniciativas
the following way.
de
First, we will
distintos
hear
videos
two
de 5
initiatives,
minutos de
their
duración
respective videos, and
seguidos de un
5-minute
espacio de
interventions,
preguntas y
followed
respuestas.
by an opportunity for
Según la
Q&A.
programación de
This will
los
last
siguientes
approximately
episodios.
12 minutes.
Luego pasaremos
Then we
a
will
las
move on to the two
iniciativas
remaining
que tendrán
experiences,
también un
and we will
lapso
also have an
de duración
opportunity
similar
for
al de la
comments and
presentación.
questions at the end of those
Todos los
presentations.
especialistas que
I would like to
participen
invite
en esta
you to
dinámica
actively
podrán
participate by
expresar
leaving your
sus dudas
questions in the Zoom question
y
box and in the live
participar en el
transmission, the
debate
live
entre
YouTube
pares.
streaming, and each
Todos los
speaker will have
participantes
5 minutes.
podrán
And I will let you know when you have
simplemente
1
comentar,
minute
dejar sus
left.
preguntas y comentarios en la caja de preguntas de Zoom y en el chat de transmisión de vivo de YouTube. Las preguntas las
We will be constantly going over the questions so that we can answer them during the Q&A period. Remember that you can also follow the conversation on our social networks, such as YouTube and others. And please be sure to use the FAO Transforma hashtag. Without further ado, I would like to invite you to watch the video of our first experience called Andean Landscapes, Fostering Sustainable Livelihoods in the Ecuadorian Andes. Actually, my mistake. We will be hearing about what has occurred in Nicaragua and supporting the recovery of livelihoods and income generation of artisanal fishermen, which has allowed more than 1,700 fishing families in Nicaragua to improve their lives thanks to the recovery project after Hurricane.
Más de 1.700 familias pescadoras de la región autónoma Costa Caribe Norte de Nicaragua han mejorado sus condiciones con el proyecto Apoyo a la Recuperación de Medios de Vida y Generación de Ingresos de Pescadores Artesanales afectados por los huracanes ETA e IOTA en noviembre de 2020. Los huracanes afectaron a casi 5.000 pescadores de la zona. La FAO en Nicaragua pudo llegar a 17 comunidades indígenas de la región, ayudarlas a superar la ola de la emergencia y enfocar sus esfuerzos en la recuperación de la cadena de valor de la pesca artesanal en las zonas afectadas. El proyecto entregó 67.400 materiales, equipos e insumos para la pesca, acopios, salas de proceso y comercialización, apoyando así la recuperación de los medios de vida junto con capacitación y asistencia técnica. Con esta iniciativa, se reactivaron 97 acopios y 10 salas de procesos. Además, 550 mujeres comercializadoras fueron apoyadas con bienes y capacitaciones.
Las mujeres sí podemos salir a abarcarnos, a trabajar, a salir adelante en cualquier área de trabajo, porque sí podemos.
Yang kay kan kiralilya kay kisna yang kasakyam ni kay kisna mayrin na ni sinsel baha miski ba na ilah kalupya sa kipawi sa wa imayana era bara yang kasaklilya kay kisna.
Mayrin na ni sutni na yang upa lilias na an yang tingki wis na sakuna mala daw kay ka kumsin ay ki bangwan sa kabu sal karay baikan batalya ra sal ka baplapis sa bamna warta ki bitaw kaya.
Sin duda alguna, esta es una gran experiencia que ha
This is a fabulous experience carried out by FAO in Nicaragua with its partner, USAID. 17 indigenous communities were supported during the emergency, and also artisanal fisheries were revitalized in this area. Now allow me to give the floor to Ligia Esther Calderon, Senior Program Specialist, and she will share her experience and insights with us. Go ahead, Ligia. Thank you, Catalina. Thank you for allowing me to share the FAO experience with you with regard to supporting the recovery of livelihoods and income generation of the artisanal fishermen in the Nicaraguan coastal region affected by 2 hurricanes. Now, in November 2020, Hurricane Eta was categorized as a Category 4, and then just a bit later, Hurricane Yoda, Category 5, hit the same region as Eta hit. Now, both of these hurricanes provided more than 37% of the rain in just a 18-hour period, all the precipitation that should be over the entire season. So that and high winds caused by this type of climate event exacerbated the situation. Now, the artisanal fisheries sector was seriously affected. They did not have enough fishery tools. Their artisanal fleet was damaged or destroyed. Their collection centers were either damaged or destroyed as well. And their more than 5,000 households were facing a crisis. Their livelihoods were in jeopardy, and they had no way to recover from the impact of both hurricanes. Now, the artisanal fisheries products constitute an important source of food and income for the communities in the Caribbean coast. More than 40% of the labor force depends on artisanal fisheries for their livelihood. This is one of the most important economic activities for women in the region. Fishing is something that is carried out in different bodies of water, rivers, lakes, and the ocean. And the FAO has statistics stating that more than half of the labor force, 51% of the artisanal fisheries market in that area are women. And this area was affected by these hurricanes. And most of the women, 93%, actually sell this fisheries product. So this project was directly implemented by FAO with a contribution by USAID and was able to support the recovery of livelihoods and income generation for more than 1,700 households that rely on artisanal fisheries and that were located in the areas directly affected by the hurricanes. Now, 100% of these households are indigenous and Afro-descendant communities, and they have a constitutional right to enjoy and take advantage of water, bodies of water, forests, and land, and they have the right to carry out their traditional lifestyles. Technical assistance was provided to reconstitute their fishing gear, their fishing inputs, and their artisanal fisheries lifestyles and the storage centers. Now, this all started with technical assistance workshops and training in the area with regard to processing the fish and other products, and FAO promotes the urgent need to have short-term responses, and these short-term initiatives allow the communities to overcome these crises in a sustainable fashion. To the extent that the communities are able to become more resilient, they have more capacity to face the development process. And this is an excellent response for the community. Now, questionnaires were rolled out with the participating communities, and it was shown that this was key for the region. And FAO has another version of a similar project related to scaling up empowering technological innovation, fostering value chains, and working with natural resource management, all to improve the community's resilient livelihoods. Thank you. We are working towards meeting those goals. Thank you, Ligia. Very interesting.
Ahora vamos a ver. Sí. Ahora les invito a ver el video de la experiencia bajo una
Now I
vida.
would like to invite you to watch another video called Andean Landscapes, Fostering Sustainable Livelihoods in the Ecuadorian Andes. This was carried out in cooperation with the European Union. This is
En las provincias andinas de Bolívar, Cotopaxi, Imbabura y Pichincha en Ecuador, la agricultura despliega un importante papel económico y social. Aporta en promedio el 26% del empleo y representa el 20.7% de los ingresos de la población. La agricultura en el área de influencia ocupa el 38% de la tierra total y se basa en cultivos de subsistencia y ganadería extensiva. Además, es un sitio importante para cultivos de exportación. No obstante, estos paisajes agrícolas productivos enfrentan graves amenazas debido a la deforestación, degradación de la tierra y pérdida de servicios ecosistémicos. El proyecto Paisajes Andinos, implementado por la FAO y financiado por la Unión Europea, se enfoca en el manejo sostenible de la tierra, mejorando la planificación y capacidades institucionales, promoviendo la sostenibilidad ambiental y apoyando a las cadenas de valor agrícolas. Con estas acciones se busca mejorar la calidad de vida de la población rural, conservar los ecosistemas y fomentar la resiliencia frente al cambio climático. El objetivo principal de esta iniciativa es fortalecer medios de vida sostenibles y proteger los servicios ecosistémicos en el territorio de alcance, mediante la gestión en fortalecimiento de políticas y gobiernos locales para el manejo sostenible de la tierra, implementación de mecanismos de conservación y restauración y mejora de productividad en cadenas de valor sostenibles a través de servicios de extensión, mercado y financiamiento. Además, el proyecto contribuye con asistencia técnica, insumos y fortalecimiento de servicios rurales, promoviendo cadenas de valor sensibles al género y comercio local. El enfoque integral mejora los medios de vida locales y la salud de la población, impulsando la recuperación sostenible pospandemia en estas zonas. Durante sus 3 años de implementación, el proyecto Paisajes Andinos ha consolidado su operación con 82 asociaciones y comunidades en las estribaciones occidentales de las provincias de Bolívar, Cotopaxi, Imbabura y Pichincha. Hasta la fecha, más de 2.600 familias han sido beneficiadas y el 50% de ellas son lideradas por mujeres. El proyecto ha gestionado el mejoramiento integral de 6 cadenas de valor, 14 emprendimientos asociativos y 17 encadenamientos productivos, fortaleciendo los procesos y la gestión de espacios de comercialización. Como resultado del fomento del manejo sostenible de la tierra, se han logrado 7.436 hectáreas con prácticas de producción sostenible, 1.452 hectáreas en restauración y 59.159 hectáreas en conservación. Además, el proyecto contribuyó a la construcción de importantes políticas públicas, como la Ley de Recursos Hídricos y el Plan Nacional de Páramos, para preservar la provisión de servicios ecosistémicos en las provincias de incidencia y el país. En resumen, el proyecto Paisajes Andinos, durante los 3 años que lleva de implementación, ha impulsado acciones para una gestión sostenible del territorio y un desarrollo económico equitativo para las comunidades locales, generando resultados positivos en capacidades, conservación de ecosistemas, acceso a finanzas verdes e inclusivas y mejora de las cadenas de valor.
Quisiera decirles que como
I'd
ecuatoriana
like to tell you that as an Ecuadorian, I am proud of the work that is being done that intends to improve sustainable livelihoods and to protect ecosystemic services in the region, strengthening local policies, preservation, and the structuring of ecosystems and the drive to sustainable supply chains. We have Javier Jimenez with us, coordinator of the Paisajes Andinos project. You have 5 minutes, Javier. Go ahead. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be present in this event. It's a pleasure to be able to share the experiences of these last 3 years in this project, a very ambitious project because it's the first initiative that addresses landscape management in the country. I believe we should scale projects that only focus on conservation or production to look at the territory in a much broader context or inclusive context with all these factors, ecosystemic services, restoration, conservation, but also understanding that these are territories in which communities live their lives. They develop their livelihoods and production activities, but it is also associated to production and agricultural and cultural aspects. So thinking of landscapes is a much more holistic view of the territory. And this is an important challenge because you need to involve many stakeholders, and sometimes they have different visions regarding how to manage the specific interests. So the project is intended basically to promote livelihoods in the Antoninas communities, looking for commitment to conservation and preservation, sometimes to talk about taking care of the páramo or taking care of the forest. They do not really feel identified as when we talk to them, supporting them to doing transition to sustainable systems. So this is what we've done in this project by signing informed consent. In many of these territories we work, these are territories that are owned by the community. So any type of intervention needs to have the buy-in of the community. What we do is to submit the proposal to the communities, and we evaluate their perspectives regarding the work, so as we can do an intervention that is basically a tailored suit, so to speak, to the communities, to the present value chains, the potentials that exist regarding conservation and preservation, and a very significant focus on women and the youth, and also on topics of mitigation and adaptation. This is how we come up with a proposal for the communities, and by having their buy-in, we can start working with them. This consent is an exercise of communities' rights, allowing us to work on sensitive topics. And according to the requirements of the population, I believe this has been a very important tool in the success we've achieved so far regarding how the message has been received and the conviction of the people about the activities we conduct. Currently, our work is very much connected with the work done by the Livestock and Agriculture Ministry and the Ministry of Water and Ecologic Transition, because we have a very ambitious goals. And basically, we have tried to find local stakeholders that are key in the territorial management, provincial, municipal governments, academia, research centers, and in some cases even private businesses. You saw the video. Many of the value chains have been able to manage that direct connection between growers and the industry, many times with the possibility of creating differentiation and also access to external markets. I believe our logic is to support these livelihoods, but all the time connected with conservation and restoration schemes with the communities. And what we've tried to do is to scale this up to formal ways of conservation, although there are community agreements that the people uses for purposes of conservation. We've tried to come up with instruments connected with the declaration of sustainable use reserves through the decentralized autonomous governments or the Ministry of the Environment. That is the entity that manages the declaration of these types of spaces. You have 1 more minute, Javier. Okay, I will try to summarize then. And this means that we've achieved significant degrees of sustainability with our initiatives, because we're not only talking about the community, but about the institutions. Because these instances will have to invest resources. We are achieving conservation, and the biggest challenge is the interinstitutional articulation and come up with space so that different stakeholders connect with the strategies and to think of a sustainable territorial management. Thank you. Thank you, Javier, and I'd like to thank the team behind this project. We will now listen to the intervention of Francisco Ureña, Cooperation Attaché of the European Union in Ecuador. Unfortunately, Francisco is unable to be with us today, but he will be joining us anyway on this video presentation. Good morning, everyone. My name is Francisco Ureña Lara. I am Cooperation Attaché from the European Union in Ecuador. And I'd like to thank first for the invitation we have received from FAO to participate in the FAO Transforms Fair. The vision that this delegation has about the Paisajes Andinos project is a very positive one. One key element of this positive vision is the collaboration that exists between the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of the Environment, Water and Ecological Transition, and FAO. This relationship has allowed to set annual plans that are adapted to the post-COVID situation in Ecuador that have been correctly implemented. Financial resources mobilized around 5.4 million euros allow for 5,000 beneficiaries broken down into 4 regions and 42 parroquias in Ecuador to improve their livelihoods thanks to improving governance, both locally as well as nationally, in order to do landscape management, the creation and dissemination of tools for conservation, the restoration and sustainable management of landscapes on the part of the indigenous populations, and also to reinforce the value chains in order to create larger impact. All that is done with a gender approach across the board. These activities are in line with other ones supported by the European Union in Ecuador that are part of the green agreement that we want to foster with the authorities and the Ecuadorian population. Finally, we hope that those good experiences today and tomorrow in the Paisajes Andinos project may be interesting to other landscapes, both in Ecuador and other countries, and the European Union delegation will always be available to respond to your questions. Thank you very much for your attention. We'd like to thank Francisco for sending his impressions about this initiative. After looking at these two experiences, it is the time to go to our Q&A. Please, those of you who are watching, you can leave your comments and questions in the chat and in the question box in YouTube and Zoom. In order to start this round of questions, I'd like to tell you that if the panelists could answer, what would be the biggest obstacles and challenges you faced in your projects by addressing the specific difficulties in assisted communities and how you mitigated these challenges? Who would like to start? Ligia, maybe? Thank you. Well, one of the big challenges that emergency projects face is to cause our actions not to have impact on the deterioration of natural resources. For example, we deliver fishing gear, and this productive activity uses biological wealth in coastal areas, rivers, and lakes, and the inadequate use of these resources may deplete them. That may have a significant impact on the trophic chains and these ecosystems. So adequate planning of the equipment supply that responds to national regulations or with the international standards and social and environmental standards of FAO, a distribution based on the needs of people in the fishing network, also how to introduce new technologies that are friendly with the environment, and also training people so that they adopt these new technologies. And some other measures is to support do not use fishing gear that deplete resources, and those have been made tools so that we can protect resources as long as we can allow for the respect to the habits of the cultures and the communities. Thank you, Ligia. Would you like to comment anything, Javier? Yes. One of the biggest challenges
Por un lado, digamos, a veces las instituciones, los proyectos, las organizaciones pensamos que el territorio de los páramos, por ejemplo,
I think that the territories of the forest need to be preserved and they don't need to be touched, whereas communities see it as an opportunity of generating resources for their families, of course, with actions that many times go against the preservation of this land, but they happen in the territories, and the reality, those actions exist. I think that is the kind of management we do with the communities, being able to provide them with alternatives in how to manage these activities. So, for example, we have in this country lots of animals present and entering the areas under conservation. So the idea is to create space for animal management with best practices, avoiding precisely the deterioration of these very important areas. That type of management is quite difficult because we're talking about economic activities of the families. However, how to introduce best practices, restoration and conservation, and trying to prioritize the actions. It is key what we can create through the linkages with other stakeholders. As a project is that in the territory, there's lots of people who are working on similar topics, institutions, in an articulation logic, you can prioritize topics in a much broader context compared to what we individually can do. So the big challenge is being able to understand the local context of communities and the aspects that they face every day, the threats from the climate point of view that are affecting those livelihoods, how can that be addressed, what practices can be recommended, and this also how they are facing this as with their own strategies, and trying to include that together with technical recommendations and best practices. That dialogue between the community, scientists, academia, and the institutions is valid to create alternatives for a territory. And understanding that and the development of such actions and the development of the activities and the resources will have the impact that we all expect. The message is always being able to understand the context of this work and the opportunities that may arise, and how we as a project or as specific interventions that can support in addressing these requirements in the territories. Now we have a question from the chat for Ligia. How can you foster among people so that they can support in this situation? In the case of the hurricanes in Nicaragua, for example. Well, usually when the communities in the Caribbean coastal areas, which is something that happens every single year when there are natural disasters such as hurricanes, people live and coexist with this reality. What we need to do is for these people to know the behavior of such natural phenomena and to deliver meteorological information and agroclimatic information and give it to the communities in such a way that they can be ready, can be prepared to have early warnings and being able to resort to protection shelters or shelters. We will continue to have hurricanes in the Caribbean coastal areas, and therefore the need of these communities and populations to be ready, but also having measures regarding resilience. How do they adapt their production measures? How do they adapt their social work to resilience, to being able to recover or not to face these critical situations when they show up? Hydrometeorological events such as storms and hurricanes, providing the information to people so that they are alert. Even when it translates to local languages. In Nicaragua, we have many Afro-descendant and indigenous peoples with their own languages, and these people should have the opportunity of getting this information in their own language to be ready.
Thank you, Ligia. I have a question for Javier, also from the chat. Could you talk a bit more about the certification process that you mentioned, what difficulties arose, and also how well do the communities receive this idea with regard to the certification, and what benefits did this entail? I think one of the challenges was being able to recognize the sustainable production and conservation efforts. We had an impact on 3 value chains. One was cacao, cocoa, and the tropical region, and in the mountains, we are working with an Indian legume with amazing nutritional properties. So we worked with companies that were interested in receiving the farmers' crops. They work with their own, they use very few agricultural inputs. They have their own seeds and they work with their own natural fertilizers. And so the company was inquiring into the standards and requirements. And also the communities are not so keen on working with certification agencies. We had to explain to them about good agricultural practices and what the certification actually means. And so the company provided a great deal of information, a great deal of support. I would say it has been there's been a lot of effort with regard to explaining to the people the requirements that they needed to meet and the various inputs that are required for the various processes related to certification. And now The farmers are providing this legume, chocho, to the company, and they're selling it on the European market. And the farmers have received a price that is 3 times what they have received on the traditional market. They work with 4 communities and 18 farmers that are already engaged in the certification process. And as far as the benefits are concerned, a lot of the other farmers nearby are interested in engaging in this type of activity. Now, I think one of the key components is that it was necessary to provide information to the people, to the farmers, tell them what the certification process entails, and to gradually bring them into the fold. And obviously, with regard to organic production, certification is quite demanding. So information was key. I think there are definitely opportunities. For example, when we work with the projects, we consider this concept of differentiation because it provides communities with additional opportunities. We are also working with sugar cane production, panela, and we are working with more efficient furnaces or ovens that they use to cook the sugar cane to get their final product. And thanks to the more efficient ovens, we are boosting their energy consumption, and we are also fostering reforestation activities this way. As far as livestock chain is concerned, we also have an interesting value chain, and we have been able to export some of these products to Spain, and it's been beneficial to involve the producers. We have held their hands step by step, and they have since become spokespeople for the process, ambassadors, one could say, in their community. So as far as capacity is building is concerned, there's a lot of effort poured into that, evaluation and monitoring as well. And one of the issues here in this region is the people do not have any records as to what they do with their production process, and the certification calls for records. So that is one of the issues that we really need to tidy up a bit more. Also, there is a limited capacity in that region with regard to reading and writing, and one needs to be creative with them in terms of record keeping. So that's been one of the challenges. It's been a very beautiful experience, though, I must admit. And it would be nice to scale this up or over to other value chains nearby. We talked about cacao and maybe even dairy products. Thank you, Javier. It's interesting what you mentioned about scalability to other regions. We have another question in the chat for Ligia, which says, how can you provide support to the people, mental health support to the victims of the hurricanes? Have you been able to do anything along those lines, Ligia? Thank you. We have been working on recovering their production livelihoods, but we have also worked with the UN agencies, funds, and programs working in Nicaragua, and with them we have drawn up certain synergies. For example, there are, with regard to women affected by the climate crisis, 2 months after the hurricanes hit, we went to the field and we saw that the women were severely affected because obviously the women are in charge of the care community and caring for the resources and others in this indigenous community. And we were able to hook up with the other agencies to provide psychosocial support. Now, nationally, there is an infrastructure for this. They have what they call their refuge, their shelter system, and the government has set up mechanisms to provide psychosocial support to the boys, girls, women, men affected by the hurricanes. And that's one thing. But we also created synergies in order to provide support for the groups of women that we were serving under our program. Also, when we wanted to better understand the impact on the boys, girls, and adolescents during this critical period and the impact on men who had lost their livelihoods. And so we have post-disaster care and support, enabling the individuals to get back to business as usual and recover their livelihoods and begin this recovery resiliency process, including psychosocial health. Thank you, Ligia. Now we have a question for both colleagues with regard to gender and the projects, the gender component. To what extent have these two projects addressed gender equality, and how have you empowered women in the affected communities? What do you think the results and lessons are that could be applied to other programs with regard to supporting gender equality under other development programs in Latin America and the Caribbean? Would you like to start, Javier? Sure. Including the gender approach is always a key challenge. When we draw up the actions, we always include a first analytical component. Well, backing up, for example, we conduct a participatory assessment with the communities, and when doing that, we identify the various vulnerabilities and threats to their production systems and livelihoods, but we also conduct a gender analysis to better understand the participation of women in decision-making and the resource management and the activities as a whole. And this is part of the plan, design, and implementation, and allows us to consider certain measures and practices that will favor women's participation in order to close the gender gap. For example, we can see that although women are actively involved in the activities, women are not so involved in the decision making, but they are the backbone of all of these activities. So it was important to understand their schedules and how we could make room for them to participate in the training sessions and the decision making as well. So we also have, I guess what you could call childcare available for the children during the workshops so that the women can participate. And we always make sure that the workshops and training sessions were held at times when the women would be able to participate. So as far as livestock is concerned, the women are in charge of farm management and animal management and handling. One of our targets is to work with at least 30% women, and 50% of the women involved, of the people involved in these projects are women, more than 500 women. And they are often in charge of everything because their husbands have migrated to the urban areas for work. So we truly do our best to meet their needs and to address the challenges related to the work burden, the labor burden. For example, when we work with rotating pastures and we employ the electric fences, we see that the women are in charge of moving the herds around. And they do this 3 to 4 times a day. They have to move the water source, and this takes a great deal of time because of the distances, and obviously there are security issues as well. Safety issues, rather. There have been certain accidents, and so every time the fences need to be moved, that requires a great deal of time and effort. So the women are very busy and have a great deal of work burden. It's important to understand all of that as well and understand how the communities work, what their socioeconomic and family tie structures are like. That's important. If you have that specific information, it's positive. I think it's also important to empower women with regard to other activities that are part of their regular life management activities. And it's important to foster their participation in decision making. For example, you have these savings and loans small-scale organizations, and the women, again, are in charge of these. So working with them and empowering them is very helpful in boosting their self-esteem and their concept of self-reliance. And I think that has been one of the most interesting parts of the program. Moreover, with regard to the entrepreneurial activities and socioeconomic activities, it's very interesting to see how many organizations are women-led, and we have identified certain deficiencies, tax-wise, administration-wise, in order to point these out and help them so they can close these gaps. So it's very important to understand what is going on so you can then identify gaps and seek to close these. It's also important for the men to understand the role of women and everything that they do. And sexism, machismo is very prevalent in these rural areas. And then there's violence, domestic violence as well. So we are there to address the livestock, the potato crop, etc. But there are other social aspects that we address. Thank you, Javier. I'd like to hear from Ligia. Go ahead, Ligia.
Bueno, como todos sabemos, las crisis
As we
climáticas
know, climatic crises are not impartial in terms of gender. There are more vulnerabilities for women and girls. They face worse conditions to have access to services. There are more risks of gender-related violence they are exposed to, and there are even worse inequalities. And there are also very unique threats in terms of the livelihoods, their health and their safety. For example, women in the fishing sector have historically faced inequality situations such as informal jobs, overload of household chores that are non-remunerated, the difficulty in having access to production resources, funding, life insurance, training, income. So we need to listen to women, their voices, and particularly in their own languages, so we can understand and identify leaderships and to recognize what their role is in caring for the resources and the communities, and also of the same social unit, highlighting their traditional knowledge, their role in the transfer of best practices, and paying special attention to the roles that these women exercise among the different value chains to strengthen their capabilities and supporting their economic development. The role of women in the economies of the communities. Thank you. I'd like to thank Ligia and Javier for being with us. With this, we close our first Q&A and would like to start with the next experience. In order to contribute to reduce agricultural conflict from the triple nexus of the ecologic value. This is a project that was implemented with the Office of the High Commissioner of Nations for Human Rights, the World Food Programme, and FAO. Let's watch the video about this experience.
Las mujeres del área rural han enfrentado desigualdades estructurales, políticas y económicas que limitan su reconocimiento y la plena valoración de su trabajo en la comunidad. Como resultado, se tiene poca posibilidad de participar y liderar mecanismos de toma de decisiones en la ejecución de programas agrarios o desarrollo rural.
Las Naciones Unidas apoyan el liderazgo y la participación de mujeres rurales en todos aquellos aspectos que afectan sus vidas, lo que incluye seguridad alimentaria y nutrición, así como un mejor sustento en las zonas rurales a través de la integración de género en todos sus proyectos. El programa conjunto promoviendo la gestión del entorno social, político e institucional para contribuir a disminuir la conflictividad agraria en el Valle de Polochic, implementado por las agencias OACNUD, PMA y la FAO, tiene como una de sus prioridades alcanzar los indicadores de igualdad de género y empoderamiento de las mujeres en el marco de diálogo, aumento de capacidades y habilidades para la gestión y abordaje de la conflictividad agraria, asegurando su participación en la toma de decisiones, prevención de conflictividad y uso de tecnología, asignando un 30% del presupuesto para promover dichas acciones.
Para el seguimiento programático y presupuestario del programa conjunto se desarrolló una herramienta denominada tablero de género, el cual está estructurado de la siguiente forma. Primero, establece lineamientos específicos que orientan la incorporación de acciones sensibles al género en cada una de las actividades que conforman los resultados del proyecto, incluyendo el monitoreo y evaluación de la iniciativa. Segundo, cuenta con una lista de verificación que permite dar seguimiento al avance programático y financiero, asignando un valor y generando un porcentaje de progreso por cada actividad, según los fondos asignados, incluso en actividades en las cuales convergen las tres agencias implementadoras del programa conjunto. Y tercero, mecanismos y herramientas de apoyo como medios para garantizar el cumplimiento de los lineamientos a través de acciones concretas que vinculan con las actividades de la iniciativa. El tablero de género es una herramienta que nos pone los lentes de género para la planificación de las actividades y facilita la elaboración de reportes programáticos y financieros en los cuales se puede presentar cómo las intervenciones del programa conjunto contribuyen a la promoción de la igualdad de género.
El tablero de género permite a las agencias implementadoras del programa conjunto revisar indicadores, desarrollar herramientas y metodologías que se implementan en cada uno de los resultados del proyecto, permitiendo cuantificar la contribución financiera que garantiza el compromiso en favor de las mujeres.
Interesante proyecto con enfoque de
It's
género.
a very interesting project with a gender approach, which delivers concrete actions for the development of the communities. Monica Coy is the interagency project coordinator, and she will share her views on the project. You have 5 minutes. Monica, go ahead, please. The floor is yours. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be able to share here in this fair where we can see the actions. As it was mentioned, the joint program is made up by the 3 agencies and the World Food Program. Today, we have the chance of presenting the tool prior to presenting what were the actions during the design of the project. Those actions to implement also gender markers, equality for the benefit of women, to grant and promote equal genders. Unfortunately, the speed of the speaker and the lack of a proper microphone prevent us from delivering a proper message. We'd like to apologize for that. We'll do our best. Dialogue with local leaders with the objective of identifying gaps, decision-making, access, use, control of the land. The joint program is implemented in this valley, integrated by 2 departments. These are indigenous and farmers communities. During the implementation, we identified what were these support tools to do the follow-up, to identify and measure these goals according to the progress of the joint program. The fundamental objective of this program is to create tools to promote those methodologies and skills with indigenous and peasants communities to improve management. With this tool, we will be applying what FAO promotes, which is the these drivers access to technology. Women's groups in rural areas have had the chance of being part of receiving training on certain tools, innovative tools for this territory to create data, to promote governance, to identify what are relationships that are present in the territory from practical points of view, community knowledge, and how this converges or can be seen with the actions that are conducted from the government. The joint program presents this gender dashboard that allows us to follow up shared goals and programmatic actions defined in the joint program.
Muchas gracias, Mónica, por tu valioso aporte en representación del equipo que está llevando
Thank you, Monica. On behalf of the project team, I'd like to let Elizabeth Lucy Turner, who is the coordinator of the Secretariat for the Peace Building Fund PB in Guatemala. Good morning, Elizabeth. Go ahead. You're on mute, Elizabeth. Good morning. I'd like to greet everyone. It is a pleasure to greet you. My name is Lucy Turner, and I coordinate the Secretariat and the Fund for the Peace Consolidation of the United Nations in Guatemala. And from the Secretariat, I'd like to express our joy to the project team and the project value for the development of this dashboard, which is an excellent tool. But maybe before delving into the tool itself and the dashboard itself, to talk about the project and why we believe it is important as a fund, this project being implemented in the Project Valley with the engagement of 3 agencies of the United Nations system, FAO, the World Food Programme. This project is framed by our current strategic framework for PBF in Guatemala for 2020-2025 that has 2 priority areas in which we have a priority area focused on reducing territorial conflicts in a peaceful manner, in also a collaborative and inclusive manner, and also guaranteeing human rights and equal access to sustainable human development. So this project that has a focus on agricultural conflict is focused on this second area of our strategic framework, which is the umbrella of all the schedule of the fund in the country, and reduces agrarian conflict in a context that uses the largest percentage of territorial conflicts in Guatemala, which is precisely agricultural or agrarian conflicts. So this is a priority for the country. And in fact, it is the first PVF project that contributes with this topic. So that's why it is an important project for us to pilot different efforts to see how we can reduce that kind of specific conflict. And in that sense, that there are many other characteristics in this project that we consider important in the sense of introducing explicitly the approach of conflict from this triple nexus between peace, development, and humanitarian action being a topic or an approach that is gaining more and more importance in the United Nations systems. And from PVF, we're also interested in looking at how these 3 spheres that are interconnected and supplementary can be incorporated in our programming. So here, what this project reflects is that this is an effort of implementing, addressing this agrarian conflict, but it's connected to medium and long-term efforts to build community resilience in favor of their development, that in turn is a strategy to reduce the recurrence of humanitarian crisis regarding food and nutritional insecurity. So in that sense, it is an important pilot for including this triple link. And it's also an important project for having a project that is with a focus on the local context. By being more granular and more localized, our interventions and our efforts hand in hand with the structures and the stakeholders and leaders of the community. This project that also works with key institutions, but has that approach in improving, in prioritizing the work with 10 peasant and indigenous communities that have faced challenges with agrarian conflict that impact their development possibilities and has an impact on the recurrence of a humanitarian crisis, as I said. So this is the importance of the project. And I know I'm running short of time, so I'm going to discuss now how we see this dashboard from this secretariat. We believe that this is a very important tool because for the fund itself, introducing the empowerment of women and gender equality is a priority, that is reflected in the work of this fund from two areas: the initiative for promoting gender initiatives, which is a specific invitation that the fund launches every year to stimulate the introduction of projects for the funding with an approach on women's empowerment and gender equality in order to promote significant engagement in peace consolidation processes. So we have that invitation that emphasizes on the topic because for the fund, the significant engagement of women in all stages of the conflict is recognized as fundamental. So this is a way. The other way is the mainstreaming of these topics in all projects, regardless whether they received. It is a criterion for the design of all PVF projects to assess how this approach has been incorporated in all the dimensions of the project, from the analysis, for the intervention and strategies, the budgeting, and the different activities. And that's why in our budget format, we have that requirement of breaking down the percentage of each activity that is devoted to gender, women empowerment, and gender. So this is part of our format, and all projects should introduce this specificity in their budgeting and to ensure that at least 30% of the budget is earmarked to empower women in peace consolidation. So in that sense, it is integrated into our program documents, and it's a requirement that all agencies, when reporting detail, should provide detail on how this approach has been introduced in the project. So I'd like to appreciate the effort of this project to go beyond the format of the fund itself and to develop an additional tool, which is this gender dashboard that we know of today, which is a tool that includes another level of discipline in the agencies in terms of how to report effectively how these activities are introduced in each one of the activities. As a fund, our requirement is on the semi-annual and annual reports. We must report on these activities, but this tool is a supplementary tool, we should say, that reinforces the requirement of the fund and sets up a discipline and accuracy and the agencies of constantly reviewing if in fact we are meeting what we have promised to do. So in that sense, I believe it is important in terms of changing habits and practices of all of us paying attention to report about these activities and not to wait until when accountability is required for the donor to consider whether we are incorporating those actions in our daily work. I believe, therefore, it is a very important tool, and I'd like to close by saying that we are paying attention, close attention to the piloting of this dashboard. It is under implementation by the three agencies. It has been coordinated among the three agencies, which is another feature that we appreciate, and we believe that it has a lot of potential beyond the project itself or being adopted as a tool by other PBF projects. In this way, we can scale it up and see an impact beyond this project focused on agrarian conflict, but on all the other efforts that we are funding in favor of peace in Guatemala. So thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth, for your. I'd like to invite you, you and Monica, so that we can discuss these ideas during the Q&A. But before that, I'd like to check the last experience that we need to present today, which is the project entitled Boosting the Resilience of Small Producers for the Recovery of COVID-19 in Latin America. Developed thanks to the cooperation between FAO and the Canadian government through the agency Global Affairs Canada. Let's watch the video.
El programa realizado en colaboración con el gobierno canadiense mitigó el impacto socioeconómico del COVID-19 en productores y productoras en situación de vulnerabilidad. Más de 19,000 familias, en su mayoría pertenecientes a pueblos indígenas y afrodescendientes, mejoraron sus medios de vida y su seguridad alimentaria y fortalecieron su resiliencia frente a impactos futuros. Adicionalmente, el programa benefició de manera indirecta a más de 49,000 hombres y mujeres rurales. El proyecto buscó de manera especial entender y responder a las necesidades de las mujeres para disminuir brechas de equidad. Las personas que participaron en el proyecto recibieron asistencia técnica, capacitación, insumos y apoyo para el desarrollo de cadenas productivas locales y acceder a mercados en un enfoque integrado y con resultados visibles en el corto plazo. En Perú, el proyecto fortaleció la resiliencia y seguridad alimentaria de los pueblos indígenas en Atalaya y Satipo. Se brindó asistencia técnica en 43 comunidades nativas para apoyarlas a implementar buenas prácticas de producción agrícola y pesquera. Esto se logró mediante 21 escuelas de campo, conservando sus tradiciones y cosmovisión ancestral de los pueblos indígenas. Además, se capacitó y entregó equipos de drones para que pudieran llevar a cabo monitoreo forestal comunitario y establecer alertas tempranas ante incendios. En Nicaragua, el proyecto se implementó en el corredor seco del país, apoyando a familias vulnerables a reducir los impactos socioeconómicos del COVID-19 y de la sequía, promoviendo prácticas sostenibles y resilientes para enfrentar mejor futuras amenazas. Se crearon y fortalecieron emprendimientos. Las familias productoras recibieron bonos para la reactivación productiva. También se crearon 60 bancos comunitarios de semillas. En Bolivia, el proyecto se llevó a cabo en 34 municipios de La Paz, Chuquisaca y Santa Cruz, áreas con altos niveles de vulnerabilidad, desnutrición y riesgo frente a choques climáticos. Se desarrollaron 34 centros demostrativos de capacitación, empoderando a productoras y productores y facilitando la transferencia de saberes técnicos y tradicionales a mujeres y jóvenes para una producción sostenible y resiliente. Se respaldaron emprendimientos individuales, mejorando su comercialización mediante ferias locales. Además, 23 gobiernos autónomos municipales impulsaron sistemas de información para la preparación ante desastres, formando a un total de 103 comunicadores populares. En Honduras, el proyecto se ejecutó en 3 mancomunidades, Manorcho, Mamsepaz y Amfi, caracterizadas por el alto nivel de vulnerabilidad social y económica. Se incrementaron las capacidades productivas, brindando insumos y asistencia técnica para la recuperación de los medios de vida de las familias productoras, tomando en cuenta la participación activa de mujeres, pueblos y nacionalidades y, sobre todo, adolescentes y jóvenes. Además, se logró potenciar 2 centros financieros de desarrollo facilitando el acceso a crédito de 265 emprendedores. Al igual que en los otros países, las mujeres fueron empoderadas para participar activamente en todas las actividades. El proyecto se basó en un modelo de cogestión, articulado con organizaciones de base e instituciones locales. Esto permitió responder de manera eficiente a la compleja coyuntura socioeconómica de hombres y mujeres productores como resultado de la pandemia. El proyecto promovió un enfoque de recuperación con transformación, priorizando la inclusión y el empoderamiento de mujeres, jóvenes y pueblos indígenas. Rescató la importancia de promover el uso de tecnologías y saberes ancestrales, reconociéndolas como herramientas de desarrollo, resiliencia y sostenibilidad. Identificó oportunidades para empoderar a mujeres y jóvenes, generando oportunidades de ingresos, reduciendo brechas y visibilizando su potencial como agentes de cambio. La iniciativa además respondió a una emergencia y logró fortalecer la resiliencia de los sistemas agroalimentarios en un contexto de crisis compleja. Además de los impactos continuados del COVID-19, la incidencia de otros factores económicos como la inflación, choques climáticos, conflictos sociales y la inestabilidad política conllevaron a la adaptación operativa de las actividades para poder garantizar el cumplimiento de las metas programadas.
Excelente video que destaca la reducción de las brechas de género y
That
la
is an excellent video highlighting the reduction, the closure of gender gaps and technical assistance, training and support for the development of local productive chains in Peru, Nicaragua, Bolivia, and Honduras. For more details on this project, let's invite Alexis Vallejos to speak. He's a regional monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning specialist, a meal specialist. Go ahead, Alexis. Thank you, Catalina. Good morning, everyone. For us, it's truly important to see what this video shows, that they were so creative in terms of the programmatic efforts with regard to carrying out the FAO project supported by the Canadian government, implementing the project in 4 countries throughout the region. I just wanted to add to what the video was showing you. It's very important for you to learn from me that this program works to anchor a different program that was worked on with 5 other African countries and is part of a common framework. So jointly with the Canadian government, we focused on a regional program and a country level program, but it's also part of a global program. I would also like to mention that this program was successful in capitalizing for 22 months of the intervention in 2021, 2022, capitalizing the outcome, and this was during the pandemic. Now, there were some cross-cutting aspects that allowed to boost the livelihoods of the entire beneficiary population. Here you can see the scope of the program and the geographic coverage. We were successful in that we were able to work in very large swaths of land and work with a large number of beneficiaries and to link up different indigenous peoples when participants of different nationalities. So again, gender and working with young people and adolescents were 2 mainstreaming components. And thanks to this, we were able to secure specific results in the process. Now, these results are obviously linked according to the community's needs. For example, it was important to soften the impacts related to the pandemic and to provide support, economic support to the people to recover their livelihoods, and also to foster sustainable practices that are adapted to the emergency response and anticipatory actions at the country level. Working on empowering women was key as well, and working with young people. These were both priority groups for the work carried out under this program. Allow me to also refer to something very important. We are valuing the work carried out in each country, and as I mentioned, it was necessary to soften the impact of the pandemic's results. This was based on an assessment and preparation. For example, we came up with a baseline in order to understand the status of food security of the families and how they were affected by the pandemic. And then jointly, we aimed at prioritizing the production change that should be focused on as part of this coordinated effort. As I mentioned, we focused on recovering their livelihoods by supporting all the chains on the production chain, all of the links on the production chain, primarily commercialization, because a lot of the rural peasant women farmers sold their wares on local markets, and so we were trying to strengthen that component. We also worked with local actors and institutions, both public, private, and government. This was helpful in stabilizing the emergency plans for anticipatory actions and thus foster resilience among the communities the program served in the 4 countries. As you can see, in addition to being an individual country level program, this is also a regional program and a global program. As I mentioned earlier, this involves innovative, sustainable practices that were key in enabling the process to strengthen the livelihoods of the beneficiaries.
Alexis, y gracias también al equipo detrás del proyecto.
Thank you for that. Here you have some pictures of some key members of this activity. And now we will hear from Amrain Boomgar, Deputy Director of Agricultural Programs and Finance from Global Affairs Canada. Thank you, Amrain, for joining us today. Go ahead.
I should start by apologizing to everybody for not being able to speak Spanish. If I do it, you will leave the room right away. But I will try my best to express my congratulations to you in English. So let me start by thanking everybody who's attending this event, but all the people who have been working on this initiative, I should say initiatives. Like Alexis mentioned, this is more than a country initiative. It's more than a regional initiative. It's more of a global initiative. I would like to start by thanking FAO for being the agent that was able to gather a variety of actors in many contexts, whether communities, whether governments, whether local authorities, to make this happen in a very short time frame. From the beginning, we knew this program was meeting communities experiencing severe crisis. Sustaining livelihoods that were hard in the first place became harder. This program had to work at the nexus of development and humanitarian assistance to some extent to strengthen resilience, but to rebuild capacity that was lost in a blink. So that the nexus shock and food security and the climate disaster after that we don't hit as hard. We need to mention those challenges up front. And And again, I would like to reiterate my thank yous to all the people who were involved in these initiatives. And this is all across. I have to say that one of the satisfactions that we have is the capacity of actors to gather generously and share and collaborate in times of crisis like COVID, which I hope we'll never see again. Of particular interest, I think FAO's ability to build on existing networks to coordinate that collaboration with other projects was paramount. I think it was crucial to success of these initiatives. And we have various success levels, of course, but I think we have learned together on how to deal with these situations. And I hope that evidence shows that we are now better prepared to face this type of situations in the future. It is also important to mention the diversity of activities needed to work together. This nexus of short and long-term resilience. I think it has forced everybody to question their business as usual type of practices and get into a different space, which was basically do what it takes to make it happen. I would like to share a few examples actually that I came to know about following a visit of our specialists, and they came back with the report. For example, in projects like Releva in Nicaragua, the project benefited from the knowledge and support of FAO field technicians, funded through another project, which is Agri-Adapta, supported by the Swiss Corporation since 2017. It has allowed to leverage existing partnerships like this one, and it has proven to be critical to respond to the emergent needs in a very timely manner. And this is where we must kind of reflect and recognize the importance of the people who work on these areas day in, day out, and never give up. So kudos to everybody. It is important also to recognize the flexibility and the patience that was shown by communities in learning and adapting to different ways of doing from a variety of partners. I think we do offload a lot on them, and I think we need to recognize the fact that despite the fact that they are the ones in need, they're also the ones who make most of the effort. Our GAC colleagues visiting some of the projects like Releva in Nicaragua reported that the projects were strategic in supporting a network of small individuals and collective entrepreneurs to keep the local food supply chain going in Nicaragua, especially in high-value commodities. From that visit, we gathered that the entrepreneurship activities of the project allowed to start up new productive activities to generate local employment, highly needed at the time of COVID, increase income, and rebuild livelihoods of rural people. But were equally important, help increase the resilience of local value chains and markets to external shocks. I think everybody has learned a little better now how to assess the level of vulnerability of our communities and our local supply chains when they're hit by a shock like this one. The GAC delegation met with entrepreneurs who are now producing, sourcing, and distributing locally grown food sources. We're talking here about a variety of products and commodities: poultry, vegetables, dairy, bread, and also inputs, fertilizers, animal feed, and to some extent, some technical services like quality and veterinarian services. I think by shifting and diversifying sources of supply and channels of products and services that are connected locally, entrepreneurship activities filled gaps left disrupted by the pandemic and subsequent crises, such as the fertilizer shortage we see today, that was worsened by the global conflict and the war in Ukraine. By providing alternative and accessible pathways for agri-supply chain at the community level, Releva has helped create diverse and well-connected small enterprises and rural households that are less reliant on intermediaries and more self-sustained. In the rural communities, in the department of Esteli in Nicaragua, for instance, the GAC delegation also visited community seed banks supported by FAO and saw some outstanding impacts for women's empowerment. Many women farmers interviewed commented on the positive convening power of the community seed bank. As one said, I quote, "The seed bank has allowed us to gain and increase control over the selection and preservation of seeds that have good taste, are resistant to pests, diseases, and drought. It has reinforced a sense of solidarity among community members. We also see more women taking on leadership roles in our communities and more husbands supporting us." I like the more husbands supporting us part. We need to see more of that. And while we find hope through these gains, we know that monumental barriers remain and short-term projects like this one remain below what's needed to help small entrepreneurs all the way and make a strong and lasting bridge to the formal economy and escape poverty. Our hope is that future programming will craft support based on learning from the resilience of these communities in such challenging times. I invite everybody. Yes.
Excuse me, 1 minute more, please.
No worries. I invite everybody to look at the results we have achieved to date and imagine scaling up strategies to maximize impact in a lasting way. I think I will stop here. So thank you very much again for those who have organized this event and bringing all the good results together. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for including us in your plans. And I hope success for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias, Amran, y muchas gracias a todos los panelistas.
Thank you, Amran, and thank you to all the other panelists for your comments. Now we will move on to our last Q&A period. And to that end, I would like to ask our speakers to answer the following. Both projects emphasize the importance of including women and young people in their activities. So how have you been able to ensure that these population groups actually had significant participation in the decision-making processes? And how has this contributed to the overall success of the projects? Who would like to begin? Alexis, would you like to begin?
Sí, es una interesante
I can
pregunta.
start. Yes, this is an interesting question. I would classify this in two different moments. One, inclusion, and the other one in women participation. Inclusion principle, as Emran mentioned, included a very painstaking process in spite of the COVID. This meant that creating in the planning process a prior consent, especially because of the importance of the work that we conduct with indigenous peoples in this component of peoples and nationalities. So the generation of a CLPI in the countries where the work was implemented with these nations and peoples. This informed prior consent was a prerequisite for the requirements from FAO and peoples and nationalities. And there are minimum requirements that were installed in, for example, in the equitable engagement of men and women and the participation of youth in this different process. So with that, that was the first moment we had for inclusion of something that I always highlight and that I've discussed with colleagues is the operational programmatic model, which is a response to multi-risk threats, because as he mentioned, besides the COVID crisis, we had to face political, economic, and social situations in the region, both in Central America and South America, because of different government conditions that were taking place during these few years. Besides, we had to come up with a prompt response to challenges such as the war between Russia and Ukraine that increased inputs prices. And all this meant that this model to be articulated. And with that, we could create different responses to the crisis. But the response to crisis, the management model also went through a multidisciplinary process that included, for example, the work with gender specialists. We had gender specialists in each country, in which colleagues started providing a proposal of how the methodologies and tools should be used for technological transfer, providing with minimum elements through building awareness among the teams and local counterparts. So this is the first approach regarding inclusion. This even meant equitable engagement of men and women, and beyond these became central in this effort. And the agreements signed with local partners, these minimum requirements were established so that women not only to have passive engagement, but women and youth and indigenous people should have active engagement in all processes. So they went from being observers to very active participants, and that is part of the decision-making process, and that supplemented processes in which to date we have that ensuring the engagement of women and young people. For example, in Nicaragua, as Amrata said, we have community seed banks in which women and the youth participate in a new anticipatory action that we have in Central America. In Bolivia, the training centers are still led by women, and local fairs, people who were part of this project are still involved. And in Peru, women work on governance mechanisms, and they lead the processes to foster anticipatory public action. In Honduras, women's work and teenager work is part of production chains such as apiculture, where they promote knowledge, and they are innovative as well because they generate this addition to the load that women already manage, and they involve the participation of youngsters. This has meant what the project has promoted with FAO beyond being part of the program in other programs and projects that are still running, which this sustainability process is still there, and where we try to articulate and foster larger engagement of these priority groups.
Muchas gracias, Alexis. No sé si nos quiere dar sus
Alexis, I don't know, Monica or Elizabeth would like to comment on that. Would you like to comment on this question?
Pasemos a una siguiente pregunta.
Okay, we'll go to the next question. I see maybe Monica. I don't know if she's still with us. Yes, Monica is here. Yes, we said that both projects emphasize on the importance of including youth and women in their activities. How have you made sure that these two populations to have a significant engagement in the decision-making process, and how this has contributed to the overall success of the projects? Monica, go ahead. Thank you. Basically, the joint program to incorporate differentiated actions, but basically The decision-making takes place based on community assemblies. Local leaders promote equal women's engagement. They can participate in the training process, participatory workshops, and the joint program has that approach of cultural relevance. While women are participating, there's been promotion of mobile nurseries. That means that women can be in that space to establish dialogue and participate, being able to also be part of the actions required in the territory and being able to involve children and teenagers to become change agents as well in the future. The engagement helps reduce gaps. Many adult women who cannot read and write, that's why we use these other methodologies where we can use the support from local organizations. And with that, we can have a comprehensive or holistic view about those local practices. One example is the Mayan culture actions that can be done with the community. In the case of officials, so there's been promotion of the equal engagement in all the training workshops and processes. The first category is to have the engagement of decision makers, women that have been part of the dialogue to prevent agrarian conflicts in the territory, therefore introducing this to be able to say that the public institutions, from their approach to agrarian conflict, has officials that promote dialogues in the territories. Now, as to the actions from the agencies, we have the technical support, each one with their expertise and their own tools adapted to the joint program, and this allows us to have a comprehensive vision to unify and to find those commonalities to promote gender equality. Over. Thank you, Monica. We have several questions in our chat, but for the benefit of time, we'd like to start closing with the last question for our cooperation partners. What specific aspects of the projects do you think were more interesting or attractive or aligned with the values and objectives? Elizabeth, would you like to comment on that? Yes, thank you. Well, as I said at the beginning, I think this project is very much aligned with the fund for peace consolidation because it is aligned with the strategic framework in terms of reducing conflicts in the territories. So it's directly part of our portfolio to contribute to one of our strategic goals. And two, we believe that this project will, in the Polochic Valley, very adequately reflects the local context. As I said at the beginning, a fund has a priority in terms of seeing how we can connect all our actions at a local and community level and in direct coordination with the local stakeholders. So that project keeps that visible component in this design, and I've had the pleasure of supporting colleagues from the agencies and being able to attend some of the meetings with the people in the communities, and we see the ownership of the community actors in their own ownership, the training, principles, and the tools that they are receiving to improve their engagement in addressing the conflicts and also building resilience and the different dimensions of the projects. So that would be another element that I have already highlighted, but I wanted to mention it again as a project element that we appreciate. Thank you, Elizabeth. We'd like to hear a question. What specific aspects of the project you think are more attractive or interesting or more aligned with the values or objectives themselves?
I think the Feminist International Assistance sorry, do you hear me?
Yes, sí.
Thanks. So I think that the Feminist International Assistance Policy is quite clear in terms of the centrality of women in advancing development goals and the fact that we try to make space for an inclusive development agenda with a strong focus on environmental sustainability. I think this project, despite the fact that it was kicked in record time, we were able to integrate all these elements together. And I say kudos to FAO for being able to connect quite quickly with an existing network with other partners. I don't want to take the credit only for the funding. I think everybody in this endeavor has played a great role. So if I have to put something on the radar, really, it's the collaboration in a record time between the governments, national, local donors, execution agencies, existing initiatives. And I think COVID has streamlined and shown the need to collaborate more effectively. And this effectiveness that you guys have shown in a period of 22 months is exceptional. I think that's something we will keep kind of high on our esteem. Over.
Gracias, Amren. Bueno,
Thank you very much. So with these very valuable contributions, I'd like to thank the participants of segment 1 and 2 in the FAO Transforms Fair. We were able to know 4 inspiring experiences developed in this region with essential support of our cooperation partners. I'd like to highlight what it means, a better life. It's not only about numbers of statistics. Better life, it means to raise the income of our farmers, or small-scale farmers, which in turn has a positive impact on the well-being of their families and communities. It means directing our public resources toward the farming sector to support rural communities that depend on it to thrive. It implies guaranteeing land tenure, security, and ensuring women's rights to speak of a better life is a commitment to progress, equality, and well-being for all. Thank you very much for your participation in this segment of experiences that have inspired us and served as an example for future projects in our region and in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you all for your dedication and effort in this important work. Now I'd like to give the floor back to Matias Reeves. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Catalina. I'd like to thank the panelists, our dear partners and allies, without whom we could not do the work that we have done, extraordinary and inspiring work. And we are at the end of this FAO Transforms Fair. We'd like to express our joy for what we have known this day, which has been a source of inspiration. And we need to remind everyone in the different capacities is that we have the capabilities to address the most pressing challenges in our region. We have a responsibility, a very important responsibility, so we'd like to thank you for that. In order to close this space of knowledge exchange in this last day of FAO Transforms Fair, I would like to offer the floor to Maya Takagi, Regional Program Leader for the FAO Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean. Go ahead, Maya. Thank you, Matias. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. to all of you. It was a pleasure to have been with you these 3 days, and I'd like to thank everyone for their dedication and engagement, for your remarks of our colleagues of FAO and our partners that have enriched this experience in these 3 days. I'd like to reinforce the fact that these were 3 days of this second version of the FAO Transforma Fair. The first version was last year, first edition was last year. This is an instance that is still a work in progress, organized by the regional of FAO Office for Latin America and the Caribbean, and specifically to manage knowledge, and that this year also had the support of the Resource Mobilization Unit from the regional office. And the objective was to highlight the knowledge generated based on the lessons learned of these transformative initiatives that have taken place in Latin America and the Caribbean, and we hope we have been able to fulfill the objective. We tried to organize this virtually. Last year, we did it in parallel spaces, but this time we broke it down into 3 days precisely so that everyone can attend every day. But anyway, they will be recorded. And this year we organized 4 blocks of the 4 betters in the strategic framework: a better production, better nutrition, better life, with also a new space that we called a better support that relates to the strengthening, institutional strengthening. This year we also wanted to present initiatives that may be a benchmark for future projects, and also that will strengthen FAO's work and its resource partners, especially in order to establish knowledge exchange among different countries. So it's not only adding visibility, but it also looks for this exchange, and that you can find out about everybody else's experiences. And we also have our resource partners to discuss initiatives and to add these lessons learned, to add what are the differences in the work that is done. As a space for knowledge exchange between FAO, project partners, and to look for much of what you said, how to scale up in a transformative way. That was the approach, which is not very easy to look and work on this concept of transformation. And this is what we want to continue to do with you. I want to say also that besides exchanging experiences and to add visibility to the projects that we have implemented, to highlight the importance of collaboration for the 2030 agenda objectives. The strategic framework is much more focused on the 2030 agenda, especially the SDG 1, 2, and 10 that are present in our region, and also looking at rural spaces.
It's important to further develop rural places, rural areas, and how they're linked with the urban areas. Now, this year we also produced the videos prior to the fair, and we aim for these experiences shown through the videos to be shown at FAO's regional conference in March 2024 as a good example of our fieldwork, and to provide an opportunity to showcase our resource partners as well. This is a resource that will be used in the future for very important institutional opportunities. for the institution. I would also like to underscore that we have highlighted various initiatives helpful for different FAO groups of interests and in different regions, and these have been supported and endorsed by a variety of different institutions. We received many more videos that actually applied to be showcased than what we actually showed at the fair. And these will also be considered on our initiatives or our solutions bank database, which is being managed by our knowledge management area, which is a new area that we aim to further grow. I would also like to thank our cooperation agencies, partners. Without you, we would not be able to implement these initiatives. Your support is invaluable. Thanks to your support, we have made progress with the 4 betters in other areas. So I would like to conclude by thanking everyone who has taken part in this 3-day event, the government authorities, for example, public and private sector partners, cooperation agencies, and all of the team members for their commitment and efforts and working behind the scenes. Thank you. I would like to specifically thank Felipe Larrachea, Matias Rees, Macarena, and everyone who has helped us with the moderation. All of the individuals sharing their successful experiences as well, and all those who have worked on the legwork to make this event a success. The IT teams, the interpreters who always provide us support, all of you were key to the success of this event. And we hope to see you next year at the 3rd FAO Transforms Fair. And please be sure to provide us with your feedback on this process. As I mentioned, this is a process that is still being developed, and we need to hear from you in order to make it better, and in order to further strengthen the ties we have with our partners. We're also here to, again, to boost the field work and the 4 better. So thank you to everyone. Have a lovely afternoon. Thank you, Maya, for your remarks. I don't have much more to add, except I would just like to bid farewell. Although is a final remark, I just wanted to mention what a privilege it is for all of us to be here over these last 3 days and to spend our time and energy on this. We have seen all the impact that these initiatives have had, and it's quite a privilege, as I mentioned. Often, well, I know that we're all of us who work in this field professionally have clarity with regard to our purpose. And as a result, we have a great deal of responsibility to be increasingly more efficient and successful in our work, because this is something we owe to all the beneficiaries. So without further ado, I would just like to remind you that all of this information, experiments, etc., is available on FAO's America's website. So thank you. Enjoy your afternoon and your weekend. Thank you.